The rules for the next stage of Donald Trump's impeachment inquiry, they're now set. The U.S. House of Representatives just approved a resolution that really lays out how the investigation will move from behind closed doors and into the public spotlight.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
As expected, the vote was split along partisan lines. Every Democrat, with two exceptions, mind you, voted in favor of the resolution, and every Republican voted against it. But remember, this is not a vote to impeach Donald Trump. What it does is it sets out ground rules for how the impeachment investigation proceeds from here in the public eye. And before the vote, we heard plenty of dramatic words from members of Congress, from both parties, by the way, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
What is at stake? What is at stake in all of this is nothing less than our democracy.
CBC's senior Washington editor Lindsay Duncombe is all over this story. You've heard them, you've watched them vote. Can you take me through it and look at what it means now for the impeachment inquiry, Lindsay?
Well, here's why this moment is so important. This isn't, as you mentioned, a vote about whether or not Donald Trump should be impeached and there should be a trial in the Senate. That may come later. But what we saw here is all of the members, or most of the members of the House, going on record as to where they are on this inquiry and saying whether they believe the president's behavior as it relates to Ukraine and pressure on the Ukrainians to investigate political rivals is something that deserves to play out publicly in front of the American people according to the rules laid out in this resolution. And what we saw in this vote was a divided House of Representatives, a partisan split on this issue, which isn't a surprise in this Congress. However, the fact that so many Democrats, only 2 voted against this resolution, were on side with the inquiry shows a shift in the trepidation that some Democrats may have felt at the beginning of this process, potentially related or probably related to the information that has come out behind closed doors. So Democrats lining up behind Nancy Pelosi, saying that getting to the bottom of this in a public way is something that should happen. Republicans, the reverse. They believe, we saw it in the statements made ahead of the vote happening, that this is just the Democrats in a partisan move trying to get the president out of office. Here's what that sounded like.
What we're seeing among Democrats on the Intelligence Committee down in the SCIF right now is like a cult. These are a group of people loyally following their leader as he bounces from one outlandish conspiracy theory to another.
Trying to put a ribbon on a sham process doesn't make it any less of a sham. Never forget how this whole thing started. Democrats are trying to impeach the President of the United States 13 months before an election based on an anonymous whistleblower with no firsthand knowledge, who has a bias against the president, who worked with Vice President Biden.
And the White House has also put out a statement as this vote has happened and passed, saying that the president has done nothing wrong, that Nancy Pelosi's and the Democrats' unhinged obsession with this illegitimate impeachment proceeding does not hurt President Trump. It hurts the American people. Then goes on to detail things that are not getting done, or that the White House sees are not getting done as a result of the focus on this, including, of note to Canadians, the USMCA, and that also is something that Nancy Pelosi talked about wanting to pass, being on a path to passing earlier today. So certainly the White House pushing back, and this really is the beginning of that kind of partisan back and forth, because the next step now is not only the continued behind-the-scenes depositions, but then also moving towards public hearings at some point in the near future.
Let's go further into one of those behind-the-scenes events. There is a witness being heard in a closed session today. What's expected from that?
Tim Morrison, a former member of the National Security Council, working on Russia, a top expert on Russia, and he left his job at the White House in that position yesterday, leading to some speculation that it could be related to his decision to testify today. Remember, all of these officials, both from the White House and from the State Department, are telling their stories, being subpoenaed, but obeying those subpoenas when the White House doesn't want them to. The White House has said that they don't believe that people should be working with the Democrats in this process. So it had been thought that Morrison may be planning to leave his job anyway, but the timing has led to some speculation as to whether or not they could be related. And then also in terms of speculation, the big question is, what about John Bolton, the national security advisor who was fired, left not long ago of the White House? Testimony has shown he had concerns. He was alarmed by the president's behavior towards Ukraine, by Rudy Giuliani's role in all of this. He has been invited to speak before the committees next week. No subpoena yet. Then how will Bolton respond to that subpoena? He has hired the same lawyers as another official who asked a judge for a decision about whether or not he should do what the White House wants him to or obey the congressional subpoena. So there is a possibility that the idea of Bolton appearing would be something that would play out in court over a period of time, but certainly a witness that Democrats would like to hear from.
We're all watching, and I know you are too. Thank you, Lindsay. CBC's Lindsay Duncombe. She is in Washington.